The southern sun beat down relentlessly on John's brow, mirroring the heat of frustration that had long simmered within him. For 24 years, he had known nothing but the familiar rhythms of his ancestral village, the dusty paths, the modest farmlands, and the slow, predictable march of days that offered little in the way of ambition or escape. He watched his peers settle into the same routines as their fathers, content with the small harvests and the solace of tradition. But a restless spirit gnawed at John. He craved more. A broader sky, bustling streets, opportunities that stretched beyond the horizon he could see from his porch. Whispers of the north, a distant land of towering cities and endless possibilities, had reached their village like a siren's call, promising not just survival, but prosperity. It was a promise that had taken root in John's heart, blossoming into an unshakable conviction that his destiny lay beyond the red earth of his birth. He knew the journey would be arduous, fraught with uncertainties and the pain of leaving behind all that was familiar. But the image of greener pastures shimmered vividly in his mind, a beacon guiding him toward an unknown future. His older brother, Felix, shared a similar yearning, though perhaps with a touch more pragmatism. Felix, always the more grounded of the two, had meticulously saved the meager earnings from their shared farm work, envisioning a life where they wouldn't have to worry about the next season's yield. He saw the North not as an adventure, but as a strategic relocation, a place where their combined efforts could finally bear fruit beyond subsistence. The decision to leave was not made lightly. It involved countless late-night discussions under the sparse glow of a kerosene lamp, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. Their parents, stoic and traditional, offered a quiet blessing mixed with a palpable sadness, understanding the generational pull towards progress, even as it tugged their sons away, with a shared glance of resolve and a silent pact to conquer whatever lay ahead. John and Felix packed their few possessions into worn bags, each stitch a testament to their humble beginnings and their burgeoning hope. The morning they departed, the air was thick with unspoken goodbyes, the promise of a new life a powerful, terrifying, and ultimately irresistible force. The journey itself was a brutal baptism, a grinding, multi-day transit in overcrowded buses that rattled their bones and tested their resolve. As they traveled further north, the landscape outside the grimy windows transformed dramatically. The lush, tropical green of their home gave way to a drier, more rugged terrain, and the air grew sharper, carrying the scent of dust and industry. When they finally arrived in the sprawling northern city, the sheer scale of it was overwhelming. It wasn't the city of their hopeful dreams. It was a cacophony of noise, color, and aggressive energy. Towering buildings, unlike the low-slung structures they were used to, seemed to scrape the sky, casting long, impersonal shadows over masses of people who moved with a hurried purpose. John and Felix had never known. For the first time, a flicker of doubt cooled the fervent hope in John's heart. He felt utterly insignificant, a small village boy swallowed by a metallic beast of a city that cared nothing for his dreams or his struggle. They were greeted not by welcoming faces, but by the indifferent eyes of strangers and the persistent hustle of touts. Their first priority was finding shelter, a task that quickly exposed the harsh economic realities of the North. After being swindled by a landlord out of their initial deposit, they managed to secure a cramped, single room in a densely packed neighborhood known for its volatility and high rents. The room was barely large enough for two mats and their luggage, yet it represented their stake in this new world. Felix, ever the anchor, immediately set about searching for manual labor at the nearby market, driven by the immediate need for money. John, meanwhile, felt lost, his confidence momentarily shattered by the city's aggressive rejection of his easy, southern charm. He wandered the bustling streets, observing the endless stream of humanity, realizing that the greener pastures were not handed out. They had to be violently wrestled from the city's grip. The noise of traffic, the mixture of strange dialects, and the constant feeling of being watched created an unsettling anxiety. That was a stark contrast to the peaceful, if impoverished, life they had left behind. They quickly learned that in the North, trust was a luxury, and survival was a minute-to-minute calculation. The following week was a blur of exhausting, back-breaking work. Felix, utilizing his impressive strength and bargaining skills, secured work as a porter at the main market, lifting sacks of grain and heavy produce from dawn till dusk. John, less physically imposing but possessing a sharp mind, struggled to find anything steady. He bounced between fetching water for local vendors and running minor errands, his earnings meager and inconsistent. They poured their daily take on a tattered cloth spread on their floor, the small piles of currency a constant. anxious reminder of how quickly their initial savings were dwindling. Their diet consisted mainly of cheap staples, prepared over a small, shared coal pot outside their room, the persistent hunger a daily companion. That fueled their desperation and their mutual resolve. It was during one particularly grueling afternoon, while John was trying to haul cheap imported phone accessories to uninterested passers-by, that he experienced the city's true ruthlessness. A group of older, tougher-looking youths, their eyes hard and predatory, quickly surrounded him. They didn't threaten him loudly. Their menace was a silent, practiced act of intimidation. Within seconds, his small wooden tray was overturned, and his few accessories, his day's meager capital, were snatched away. Humiliated and furious, John could only watch them melt into the crowd, the city's endless anonymity providing them perfect cover. That evening, as Felix tended to his bruised shoulders and John recounted the theft, a profound sense of isolation settled over them. They were targets, outsiders with no connections, no influence, and no protection. It was a wake-up call. The North was a jungle, and they had to evolve quickly or be consumed. They needed more than just work. They needed knowledge, a guide, and perhaps a friend. The idea of navigating this labyrinth alone was suddenly too daunting, and they spoke in hushed, serious tones about the need to be smarter, to find someone local who could help them understand the city's intricate, often cruel rules. The yearning for a trusted face in the sea of strangers was becoming as vital as the need for food. The incident with the thugs left an acrid taste in John's mouth, a bitter lesson learned the hard way. The next day, he returned to the market, not with the same naive hope, but with a guarded caution, his eyes scanning every face, every shadowed corner. Felix had advised him to stick close to areas with more established vendors, hoping that their presence might deter petty criminals. It was there, amidst the vibrant chaos of a fruit and vegetable section, that fate, or perhaps just a stroke of desperate luck, intervened. John was attempting to sell a small stack of newspapers, his voice hoarse from shouting over the din, when he fumbled a sale with an elderly woman, dropping the change and scattering the coins across the dusty ground. Before he could kneel to retrieve them, a swift, elegant hand was there, gathering the coins with practiced ease. Looking up, John met the gaze of a young woman, her eyes intelligent and warm, framed by a soft, intricately tied headscarf. Her smile was disarming, a flash of genuine kindness in a city that had offered little. "You look new here," she observed, her voice clear and melodic, a stark contrast to the rough shouts of the market. "It's easy to get lost in the noise." She handed him the coins, her touch fleeting but reassuring. John, usually quick with words, found himself momentarily speechless, taken aback by her unexpected gesture of help. He stammered his thanks, feeling a blush creep up his neck. Her name, she introduced herself, was Amina. She explained that she ran a small stall nearby, selling freshly made local delicacies, and had been observing him for a while, noting his struggles and the unfamiliar accent that marked him as an outsider. "The North can be hard," she continued, her gaze softening, "but it's not all bad. You just need to know how to navigate it." She offered him a small, sweet pastry from her tray, a gesture that, in its simplicity, resonated deeply with John. It was the first genuine act of selfless generosity he had experienced since arriving, a small oasis of humanity in the sprawling, impersonal desert of the city. He felt an inexplicable pull towards her, a sense of relief washing over him, knowing that perhaps, just perhaps, he had found a glimmer of hope. One evening, as John was helping Amina tidy up her stall, a palpable excitement radiated from her. She spoke animatedly about an upcoming celebration, a major birthday party for the son of an influential elder in a village not far from the city limits. This wasn't just any party. It was a large traditional feast, known throughout the area for its opulence, music, and the gathering of key figures from the local community and surrounding areas. For Amina, it was a cultural highlight, a chance to reconnect with extended family and community traditions that the city often obscured. She described the vibrant colors, the irresistible food, and the spirited dancing with such enthusiasm that John couldn't help but be drawn in. It was a glimpse into a side of the North that was far removed from the cold, transactional market stalls, a picture of community, joy, and deep-rooted culture. She proposed they attend together. John was instantly captivated by the invitation. It felt like an opportunity to truly immerse himself in the North, beyond the endless pursuit of commerce, and a chance to spend quality time with Amina outside the confines of the bustling marketplace. He saw it as a temporary escape from their grinding reality and a way to prove to Amina that he valued her company. Amina explained that the location, though rural, was well connected, and attending such an event could even be beneficial, offering an unofficial chance to network and make connections that could later prove useful in their business dealings. John immediately agreed, thrilled by the prospect. He knew, however, that convincing Felix would be a formidable task. Felix would see it as a waste of time and precious funds, another step down the path of distraction. John decided he wouldn't even try to persuade his brother to go, knowing it would lead to a bitter argument. Instead, he would simply present it as a necessary outing, omitting the focus on Amina. He felt a familiar guilt about his deception, but the thought of the celebration, and more importantly, the chance to be with Amina, outweighed his anxiety. The night before the feast, John broached the subject with Felix, choosing his words carefully. He described the party as a chance to meet people who could be useful, contacts for their textile trade, a purely business-oriented scouting mission. He was intentionally vague about the location and completely omitted Amina's involvement. Felix, who had just returned exhausted from a long day of carrying heavy goods, was immediately resistant. He scoffed at the idea of spending money on transport and time on socializing, viewing it as reckless spending and foolish optimism. His protective wall went up immediately, demanding to know who was organizing this and what actual, quantifiable benefit it would yield. John's vague answers only fueled Felix's suspicion, leading to a heated exchange, where the underlying tensions of the past weeks finally boiled over. Felix accused John of forgetting their purpose and becoming soft, bewitched by the city's distractions. "If you're going, I'm going too," Felix finally declared, his voice thick with a mix of resignation and distrust. He didn't want to go to the party. He wanted to keep an eye on his brother. He saw himself as the guardian of their mutual ambition, and he couldn't stand the thought of John risking their future on a frivolous outing. John was internally dismayed. The last thing he wanted was Felix's judgmental presence clouding his time with Amina, but he couldn't reasonably object without revealing his deception. He quickly agreed, feigning relief that his brother would accompany him, knowing that Felix's presence would mean he had to limit his open affection for Amina. The following morning, as they prepared to leave, the atmosphere was thick with this complicated dynamic. John, excited but tense. Felix, grudgingly watchful and suspicious. The unexpected complication of Felix joining the trip would add an immediate layer of awkwardness, forcing John and Amina to navigate their new bond under the scrutiny of his unyielding brother. The meeting point was the main transport station, a bustling hub of life and departure. John arrived with Felix, whose scowl was firmly in place, and there, waiting patiently, was Amina. She looked stunning, dressed in vibrant traditional attire that elevated her natural beauty and made her stand out even amongst the colorful crowds. Her smile, reserved solely for John, faded slightly when she saw the unsmiling figure of Felix standing rigidly beside him. John made the introductions quickly, trying to inject enthusiasm into the tense moment, explaining that Felix had decided to join them for the networking opportunity. Amina, always gracious and quick-witted, welcomed Felix warmly, complimenting his diligence and expressing hope that he would enjoy the festivities. Felix merely offered a curt nod and a mumbled response, his eyes darting between his brother and the beautiful woman, confirming his worst fears about the nature of the outing. The ride out of the city was characterized by a heavy, uncomfortable silence. John was stuck between his two companions, trying to steer a light conversation that kept sputtering out. He'd make a joke to Amina, and Felix would pointedly stare out the window. He'd try to engage Felix in talk about their business, and Amina would sense the tension and fall quiet. The situation was an emotional torment for John, who saw his romantic outing hijacked by his brother's suspicion. As they traveled further away from the city, the landscape softened into rolling hills and scattered settlements, offering a scenic beauty that did little to ease the strain. Amina, however, eventually took the initiative. She began pointing out local landmarks, sharing stories about the area's history and its people, addressing her comments primarily to Felix. She was subtly trying to bridge the gap, using her knowledge of the region to engage the hostile brother. Slowly, painstakingly, a flicker of curiosity crossed Felix's face as she spoke, her voice an unexpected source of local knowledge he hadn't considered. Amina's patience and charm were beginning to chip away at Felix's defenses, but the undercurrent of suspicion remained strong. The arrival in the village was a sensory explosion. The air was thick with the rich aromas of roasting meat and spices, overlaid with the infectious sound of drums and traditional flutes. The venue, a large decorated compound, was already teeming with people dressed in their finest attire. The colors a dazzling spectacle under the evening sky. For John and Felix, who had been confined to the drab concrete and endless toil of the city, the vibrancy was intoxicating. Felix, despite his best efforts to maintain his grumpy composure, could not hide a flicker of awe at the sheer scale of the celebration. The sense of community was palpable, a stark contrast to the lonely, anonymous existence they led in the north. Amina, clearly in her element, introduced John and Felix to a handful of her cousins and distant relatives, confidently navigating the complex social web. John watched her, admiring her ease and grace, feeling a deep sense of pride to be at her side. The night unfolded in a whirlwind of communal joy. They were served enormous portions of local delicacies, the generous hospitality of Barn to their often hungry city stomachs. John found himself laughing freely for the first time in months, swept up in the music and the convivial atmosphere. He even managed to exchange a few smiles with Felix, who, after a few hours and a couple of traditional drinks, began to loosen his rigid posture. His vigilance momentarily forgotten, Amina encouraged them to join the dancing, and though initially shy, John eventually gave in, moving awkwardly at first, then with increasing enjoyment, stealing glances at Amina, whose eyes held a spark of pure delight. Felix remained on the sidelines for the most part, but he was observing, a strange mix of disapproval and reluctant appreciation warring on his face. He noted the genuine warmth of the people, and for a fleeting moment, he understood why John had been so eager to come. It was a glimpse of the greener pastures, in a non-monetary sense a place where people belonged and shared joy freely. As the night wore on and the moon climbed high, casting long, silvery shadows, Amina signaled that it was time to leave. The journey back to the city was long, and they needed to catch the last available shared taxi from the village center. A brief but heartfelt round of goodbyes was exchanged with Amina's relatives, who pressed small gifts of food into her hands for the journey. The initial three-way tension that had plagued their ride to the village had softened considerably. Felix was noticeably less hostile, a quiet reflection of the night's genuine conviviality lingering on his face. He even thanked Amina for the hospitality, a major concession that earned him a surprised smile from John. The three of them walked together toward the main road, the air cooler now and carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. John walked closest to Amina, their shoulders occasionally brushing, an intimacy that felt earned after the shared experience of the evening. When they reached the dirt road where the taxis usually waited, they found a small, crowded commuter bus preparing to depart, its engine idling loudly. Amina, checking her phone, confirmed that this was their best option to get closer to the city. Before the late night transport became scarce, they quickly paid their fares, and the three of them squeezed into a row near the back of the bus, which was already full of other revelers returning home. The bus ride was bumpy and slow, and the close quarters and rhythmic motion began to lull the passengers to sleep. Felix, utterly exhausted from his long day of work and the late night, soon nodded off, his head resting against the dusty window. John, however, remained wide awake, a contented energy buzzing within him, simply enjoying the quiet proximity of Amina, who was leaning her head slightly against his shoulder, sharing a soft conversation about the best moments of the party. He felt closer to her than ever, and a sense of optimism about his life in the north, both personal and professional, filled his heart. After about an hour of rough driving, the bus reached a junction where the main, paved road began. Here, the driver announced in a loud, local dialect that he would be making a small, temporary detour through a less traveled, unpaved route. He claimed the main road was blocked due to a sudden, unscheduled maintenance closure, a common occurrence in that region. A few tired murmurs of protest rose from the passengers, but no one seriously challenged the driver, who was clearly anxious to continue. Amina immediately looked uneasy. She leaned closer to John and whispered, her voice low and tight, that this route was known to be desolate and dangerous at night, a stretch of road that local transport vehicles usually avoided. Her concern, rooted in her deep knowledge of the area, instantly raised John's contentment. He looked around the dimly lit bus, sensing the collective tension and fear of the passengers. Suddenly, the bus lurched violently and came to a screeching, unexpected halt. The engine died abruptly, plunging the bus into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the faint light of the moon filtering through the windows. The silence that followed the engine's stop was heavy and unsettling. Before anyone could react, two large, imposing figures emerged from the dense shadows of the roadside bush, their faces partially obscured by bandanas. They were armed, one brandishing a machete that glinted menacingly in the pale light, the other holding what looked like a rough sword of gun. The door to the bus was violently yanked open, and a gruff, commanding voice bellowed, demanding that everyone remain silent and hand over all their valuables. Panic, a visceral, choking fear, erupted in the confined space of the bus. Passengers began to whimper, scrambling to hide phones and wallets. John's heart pounded a furious rhythm against his ribs, and he instinctively put his arm around Amina, whose body was rigid with terror. The two cult members, their demeanor clearly indicating they were hardened criminals, not opportunistic petty thieves, moved through the bus with brutal efficiency. The one with the machete remained by the door, acting as a terrifying guard, while the one with the gun moved down the aisle, barking orders and reinforcing his demands with aggressive gestures. The air was thick with the smell of fear and the metallic tang of desperation. Passengers quickly and tearfully surrendered their bags, watches, and phones, the silence of the bus broken only by the sharp rustle of cloth and the occasional panicked sob. The bandits were thorough, patting down passengers and ripping jewelry from necks and wrists, their actions swift and practiced. John and Amina, still huddled together, watched in paralyzed horror as the man with the gun approached their row. Felix, jolted awake by the commotion, stared at the scene with wide, disbelieving eyes. He instinctively clapped his hand over his small, secret pouch of hard-earned money, which was sewn into the lining of his trousers, a reflex that nearly cost him dearly. The cultist, sensing the subtle movement, turned his attention fully to their row. He violently shoved Amina aside, knocking her against the window, and grabbed John, roughly patting him down. John, who had little of value other than a cheap watch, complied immediately, hoping to avoid violence. The man then turned his attention to Felix, grabbing the brother's shoulder and demanding his phone and money. Felix, always stubborn and deeply protective of his money, the very symbol of their sacrifice, hesitated for a critical second. This moment of resistance was perceived as a challenge.